This is the story the Vatican never wants you to hear. For 2 years in the 9th century, the most powerful religious institution in the world was secretly run by a woman. Her exposure was so shocking, so public, so devastating that the Church has spent 800 years trying to erase every trace of her existence. They've destroyed records, changed procedures, rewritten history, but they can't kill her legend. Today, we're uncovering Pope Joan, the woman who fooled the Vatican, and why they're still terrified of her story. Picture this, it's 855 AD. Rome is in chaos. The papal throne sits empty after Pope Leo IV's death. Cardinals gather in smoky chambers. They need a new leader, fast, but they have no idea they're about to make the biggest mistake in church history. They're about to elect a woman. Her name was Joan, but they knew her as John. For years, Joan had lived the perfect lie, dressed as a man, studied theology, rose through the church ranks. And now, she was about to become the most powerful person in medieval Europe. The legend says Joan was born in England, maybe Germany. The details are fuzzy because the Vatican worked overtime to destroy every trace. But what we know is this: Joan was brilliant, obsessed with learning, and completely forbidden from pursuing it. Why? Wrong anatomy. In the 9th century, women couldn't read, couldn't write, couldn't study theology. They were property, nothing more. But Joan had other plans. She disguised herself as a man, cut her hair, bound her chest, changed her voice, and disappeared into a monastery. For years, she studied in secret, mastered Latin, devoured religious texts, became a scholar that even learned monks respected. She wasn't just pretending to be brilliant. She was brilliant. But studying wasn't enough. Joan wanted power. So she left the monastery and headed to Rome, the center of the Christian world. In Rome, Joan, who was now Brother John, quickly gained a reputation: eloquent, charismatic, a theological genius. Cardinals immediately took notice. Meanwhile, Joan studied the power structure, made the right alliances, and built a network of supporters who saw Brother John as the Church's future. By the time Pope Leo IV died, Joan was ready to do what had never been imagined in the history of the Church. On election day, Joan stood before the papal conclave. Her heart beat right out of her chest, knowing that discovery meant death. But somehow she pulled it off and became the Catholic Church's first ever female pope. A position she held for 2 years, 7 months, and 4 days before her dramatic unveiling. 2 years. That's how long the most powerful religious institution in the world was secretly run by a woman. But you know the irony? She was apparently pretty good at it. Joan's papal reign was marked by intelligence and reform. She strengthened finances.
And yet, God walked on earth, and from the lonely cruelty of his birth to the harsh agony of his death, all seemed darkness. He cried. He grew angry.
She was living with a secret that grew heavier each day. Not just her gender, another secret becoming impossible to hide. She was pregnant. Think about that situation. Joan had fooled the entire papal establishment about her gender for years. But biology doesn't negotiate. The Pope was pregnant, and she was about to give birth in the most public way imaginable. Even if you don't believe in ancient legends like Pope Joan, the radiation you find in your pocket is very real. Your smartphone emits electromagnetic frequencies that could be affecting your health. And with no regulation or requirements, most phone manufacturers can put whatever they want in their devices, which is why I'm really happy to have EMF Shield sponsoring this video. EMF Shield will ship you 100% American-made phone protection straight to your door. That way, you can get quality EMF blocking technology without worrying about what's affecting your health or where it comes from. The EMF Shield Universal Defense Phone Case reduces radiation exposure while keeping your phone fully functional, and it's compatible with most major phone models. So scroll down, click the link below for a protection you can trust. All right, back to the story. So, it's Easter Sunday, 857 AD, the most important religious procession of the year. Pope John VIII rides through the streets of Rome as thousands of faithful line the roads, cheering, celebrating their holy leader. But Joan is in agony. She's been hiding labor pains for hours. Each step of the horse sends waves of torture through her body. She knows the time is now or never. Between the Lateran Palace and St. Peter's Basilica, Joan's labor reaches its climax. Unable to hide the contractions anymore, she falls from her horse, right there, in the middle of the Easter procession. In front of thousands of witnesses, the Pope gives birth on the streets. The shock is so palpable, you can touch it. One moment the crowd is celebrating their Pope. The next moment, they're staring at a woman, in labor, on the cobblestones of Rome. The most carefully guarded secret in church history had just been exposed in the most public way imaginable. What happened next depends on which version you believe. Some say the crowd went insane with rage. She was publicly stoned to death by the astonished crowd. Others claim she died in childbirth, a tragic end to an extraordinary deception. But here's what we know for sure. The Vatican went into full damage control mode. Joan's name was removed from papal lists. Her records, destroyed. Any mention of her reign, erased. It was as if she never existed. But they couldn't erase everything. They couldn't erase what people saw. And thus the story continued to spread like wildfire, evolving with each retelling. Meanwhile, the church was terrified this could happen again. So, they allegedly created one of the most bizarre verification procedures in history. They built a special papal chair called the Sede Stercoraria, a throne with a hole in the seat. Why? So they could physically examine each new pope to confirm he was in fact male. The Sede Stercoraria, the throne with a hole in the seat, still exists today at St. John Lateran. Think about that. The Vatican was so traumatized by Joan that they created a literal genital inspection chair for future popes. That's not the behavior of an institution covering up a myth. That's the behavior of an institution covering up a very real embarrassment. But that wasn't all the Vatican did. They also changed the papal procession route. For centuries after Joan's alleged death, medieval popes avoided the direct route between the Lateran and St. Peter's. Why? Because that was allegedly where Joan gave birth. It sounds bizarre, but even the popes themselves believed the story. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Pope Joan wasn't always treated like a myth, quite the opposite. For centuries after Joan's alleged death, medieval writers treated her as historical fact. Not legend, historical fact. Chronicles from across Europe mentioned her. Statues were erected in her honor. Her story was taught as part of papal history. But then the Protestant Reformation happened and things changed. Suddenly Joan became a weapon. Protestant reformers used her story to attack Catholic authority. Look, they said, your church is so corrupt that a woman once tricked her way onto the papal throne. And that's when the Vatican shifted strategies. Instead of trying to quietly erase Joan, they declared her a complete fabrication. Fake news, they said, centuries before the term existed. But the timing is suspicious. For 400 years, the church treated Joan as historical fact. Only when her story became politically inconvenient did they suddenly declare it fictional. But here's what makes Joan's story so compelling: the details. If this was just anti-Catholic propaganda, why are the specifics so consistent across different sources from different countries? Why do the dates align so precisely with known papal vacancies? But it gets even more impossible to debunk because recently, new evidence emerged. In 2018, a German academic discovered medieval coins that might prove Joan existed. These coins don't match the known John VIII's reign. They're from Joan's period. Could these be the first physical evidence of the female pope? The Vatican has refused to comment. And as for modern historians, most dismiss Joan as a myth. They argue the evidence is too thin, the story too convenient for church critics. And well, they might be right. But here's what they can't explain. Why has this story survived for over 800 years? Why does it continue to fascinate us? Why won't it die? Maybe because Joan represents something that transcends historical accuracy. She represents the ultimate outsider.
Tyrant! We pronounce you excommunicated! You are heretic damned!
Someone who refused to accept limitations placed on her by society. In an age when women were property, she became the most powerful person in Europe. In an era when knowledge was forbidden to her gender, she became the ultimate scholar. In a world that told her no, she said, "Watch me." Whether Joan existed or not, her story exposes something crucial about power structures, about who gets to hold authority, and about what happens when those boundaries are crossed. The Vatican's reaction also tells us everything. They didn't just deny Joan's existence, they went scorched earth. Archives destroyed, records erased, routes changed, inspection chairs built. That's not the reaction of an institution dealing with a simple myth. That's the reaction of an institution terrified of a truth. Because if Joan could trick her way onto the papal throne once, what stops another woman from doing it again? What stops the entire foundation of male religious authority from crumbling? Joan's story makes those questions unavoidable. And here's what really terrifies them. Joan might not have been alone. Could one woman really pull off such an elaborate deception without help? Someone had to teach her masculine mannerisms. Someone had to cover for her. Someone had to help her rise through church ranks. Joan wasn't just one woman fooling the system. She represents the possibility of an entire underground network challenging church authority. What if there were other Joans? What if some weren't caught? That possibility keeps Vatican officials awake at night. Today, the Catholic Church still forbids women from becoming priests, let alone pope. They claim it's divine will, unbreakable doctrine. But Joan's legend whispers something different. It whispers, it's already happened. For 2 years in the 9th century, a woman was the most powerful religious figure in the world. And the Church has spent 8 centuries trying to make you forget it. The modern Catholic Church faces unprecedented crisis, declining memberships, scandals, loss of moral authority. And every time someone asks, why can't women be priests? Joan's legend provides an answer. Because we're terrified of what happened last time. Whether Pope Joan existed or not, she won. Not because she ruled for 2 years, but because her story refuses to die. Every time someone tells her legend, the Vatican's greatest secret lives again. Every time we question who deserves power and why, Joan's spirit endures. The Church tried to erase her from history, but you can't kill an idea whose time has come. And Joan? Joan was an idea 800 years ahead of her time. She became the Vatican's biggest secret by proving their biggest lie, that power belongs to men alone. The truth? Power belongs to whoever is bold enough to take it. Joan took it. And that's why she'll never be forgotten. That's why the Vatican is still afraid.
I may ask you for a return of this favor.
But what if the Pope refuses to make me a bishop?
Rest at ease, Io. Papal decisions have not been made by the Pope for a long time.
And that's why her legend will outlive every pope who came after her. Because Joan didn't just break the rules, she proved the rules were meaningless. And that's the most dangerous secret of all.